And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's September 29th, 272nd day of the year. Just 93 days remain to the year's over with. Now we get to start a new one. And it's National Coffee Day, known as the beverage that makes the world go round. International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste, minimizing excess and valuing sustenance, addresses this global challenge, preserves resources and ensures nourishment for all. National Starbucks Day, International Police Remembrance Day, International Happy Goose Day. Savor that succulent bird with its rich and tender meat and crispy skin. National Biscotti Day. Put together your own dream recipe for biscotti and add this rich, delicious, crunchy treat to your repertoire. Confucius Day. National Silent Movie Day. Launceston Cup. It's a major event that transforms the city into a vibrant hub of excitement and celebration. Held at the Ladbrokes Racing Center in Mowbray. This day is a highlight of the Tasmanian Summer Racing Carnival. Visitors and locals alike flock to the event, drawn by the thrilling atmosphere and the promise of top-notch horse racing and entertainment and other festivities. The celebration is not just about the horse race itself, but though it is a significant part of the day. This day features extravagant fashion displays, particularly the popular fashions on the field contest, which just adds to the ambiance of the event. Olive Festival in Albania. Michaelmas. Celebrates the Archangel Michael. This day specifically honors him and also marks the transition into autumn. He's known as the protector against darkness, represents courage as the nights grow longer. This day is deeply rooted in Christian tradition, reflects themes of good overcoming evil as Michael famously battled Satan. Urban National Wildlife Refuge Day. National Family Fun Day. International Day of Bids and Proposals. Navigating Business Opportunities. National Compliance Officer Day. World Heart Day. VFW Day. Seed Gathering Season. Red Valley. Durga Puja. It's a festival that honors the goddess Durga and celebrates her triumph over evil. A lot of communities come together in a joyful spirit and decorating elaborate idols and pandals, temporary structures full of artwork and colorful displays. A lot of people participate in the rituals, brings you close to the heart of the celebration. A lot of our holidays, of course, are religious motivated. Fiesta de San Pacho goes on through October the 5th. It's a celebration that fills the streets of Quibdó with music and dance and color. Honor St. Francis of Assisi. Blends Catholic tradition with Afro-Colombian culture. It's a unique and joyful celebration. Milan Fashion Week. British Food Fortnight. Ontario Garlic Week. National Drive Electric Month. Hispanic Heritage Month. World Meat Free Week. From tofu scrambles to veggie burgers. It's time to embrace your inner herbivore and give those taste buds a party with plant-based delights. Oktoberfest, which goes on through October 5th. and Fair Trade Fortnight. Well, famous people born on this date: Kevin Durant, Halsey, Zachary Levy, and Jerry Lee Lewis. That's a name from the past. Well, all that having been said, let's see what stories we got in the news, because there's been a lot going on. Well, the individual who crashed his Silverado pickup truck into a Michigan church been identified. He's a Marine veteran, Thomas Jacob Sanford. He has been identified by the police. He killed at least 4 people and injured a number of others during services at a Michigan Mormon church Sunday before he set the building on fire. He's a 40-year-old Marine veteran who served in Iraq. He was named by authorities as the man who rammed his Chevy Silverado into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Grand Blanc Township in Michigan. And he jumped out and opened fire on hundreds of worshipers gathered there. Then, after setting the building on fire, he was killed by responding officers. Police said they believed he used a accelerant, like gasoline, to start the fire. He was from nearby Burton, Michigan. He seems to be the lone suspect. He served in the Marines from 2004 to 2008 as an organizational automotive mechanic and vehicle recovery operator. That's according to the Marine Corps. He was part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Earned several awards during his 4 years of service, including the Marine Corps Good Conduct Medal and the Sea Service Deployment Ribbon and Iraq Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Medal, and National Defense Service Medal. Left with the rank of sergeant, and last duty assignment was with the 2nd Maintenance Battalion, Combat Logistics Regiment 25, 2nd Marine Logistics Group at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Well, there's been a lot of shootings going on. Had another one at a casino. Well, President Trump says there's a real chance for greatness as Netanyahu in the White House meeting looms for the Gaza talks. He's slated to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday, that's today, in an attempt to broker a ceasefire agreement and end the war in Gaza. He wrote on Truth Social, "We've got a real chance for greatness in the Middle East. All are on board for something special. First time ever. We're going to get it done." Well, hopefully. Well, Michael Cohen, of all people, stunned an MSNBC panel with a statement about James Comey's indictment. He says he believes former FBI Director Comey likely committed a crime while reacting to news of the indictment. Remember, Cohen was Trump's personal lawyer for many years, and actually surprised the panel. He says, "I don't know what the crime is, but there are hundreds of thousands of documents, and the government has each and every one of them. All they need to find is the one." If you remember, Comey was involved in the Russiagate hoax. Well, best laid plans of mice and men. Woman's car sinks in a lake as she protested ICE's arrest in Massachusetts. She was an anti-ICE protester. Forgot to put her car in park while yelling at agents, making an arrest of an illegal alien. Her car rolled into a lake and sank. That's according to Immigration and Custom Enforcement sources. Happened in Upton, Massachusetts, a small town in Worcestershire County, about 40 miles west of Boston. In the clip, the voice can be heard saying, "Well, that sucks. Look at that, Lucy." Her car got lost as the woman's car drifted further into the water. An officer can be seen passing in front of the camera with what looked like a person in handcuffs. A lot of demonstrators have been protesting ICE's presence in the area for weeks. Well, Eric Adams, mayor of New York City, has dropped out of the mayoral race as Mandami gains more ground. The Adams was expected to run for re-election. He announced his decision in a nearly 9-minute video posted on social media. Didn't give any clues about his plans after leaving office. He said, "It's been an honor to be your mayor," as he highlighted what he described as achievements related to crime reduction and housing affordability and economic recovery during his time in office. And he said, "Yet, in spite of all we've achieved, I can't continue my re-election campaign," adding he was unable to raise the funds for his serious campaign. This move followed weeks of speculation he might clear the way for former government Andrew Cuomo in a contest where Democratic nominee Zoran Mandami, Democratic Socialist, has gained momentum. Well, a conservative influencer has already been assaulted once and said it probably won't be the last time. She was Savannah Craven Antayo recounted a violent street encounter. She said left her with her whole face cut open. A lot of Looney Tunes out there. You never know what somebody's going to do. Well, President Trump won another victory in the high-stakes political battle between Republicans and Democrats over congressional redistricting. Governor Mike Kehoe of Missouri signed into law a new congressional map called Missouri First, like to hand Republicans an additional seat in the House of Representatives ahead of next year's midterm elections. Well, the Cowboys and the Packers battle to the final second as McManus kick forces NFL stalemate. The battled each other in an absolute slugfest on Sunday night, ended in a 40-40 tie. Stakes are already heightened coming into AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, as Micah Parsons was making his return to play his former team. And while his impact was felt, it was the offenses that really came into play. And the last 2 minutes of the regulation time underscored that. Dallas drove 54 yards in 62 seconds to get the go-ahead score. Green Bay was quick to get back up the field. Packers quarterback Jordan Love led the team down the field in 7 plays to set up a game-tying 53-yard field goal for Brandon McManus. In overtime, the Cowboys got the ball first. Prescott found Talbert coming back to the ball to make an incredible catch on the sideline. Somehow, Talbert got both feet in bounds to set Dallas up in the red zone. Cowboys couldn't get into the end zone, though. Parsons possibly saved a touchdown with a sack of a scrambling Prescott. Let's see what else we got. A stowaway was found in an American Airlines plane landing gear compartment at Charlotte Airport. Police homicide investigators have opened up an investigation after maintenance crew found the deceased individual. This flight came from Europe to the Charlotte Douglas International Airport in North Carolina. The maintenance staff found the body shortly after 9 o'clock Sunday morning while servicing the aircraft on the Hangar Road within the airport division. No identity as of yet. Well, let's see. Top U.S. military brass are going to hold a secretive meeting with Hegseth as Trump ramps up his Russia criticism. Hundreds of top U.S. military leaders are getting together for an unusual meeting. When it comes as President Trump has ramped up his criticism of Russia as the Pentagon gears up a new national defense strategy prioritizing homeland defense. Several War Department officials confirmed to Fox News that the Pentagon requested top military commanders to convene in Virginia for the meeting this weekend. Nobody really knows what the topic of that discussion is going to be. Well, got the Supreme Court showdown coming. President Trump's strategy to test the limits of his power could spell doom for the administrative state. Supreme Court's going to re-examine a landmark decision about the president's ability to fire members of independent agencies, and the outcome could expand executive power and have far-reaching implications. High Court revealed in an order last week it would revisit Humphrey's Executive versus United States, a 1935 decision at Hans von Spakovsky, a legal fellow at the Conservative Heritage Foundation, said is now on life support. If President Trump wins, he can have the power to fire literally anybody. Well, Samantha Ponder, an ex-ESPN host, makes her stance on men and women's sports clear. She said, "This is ridiculous." She appeared on Fox News Channel's Saturday in America with Kayleigh McEnany, talked about her decision to speak out against transgender athletes participating in girls' and women's sports. This has been a hotly debated topic in recent years, with Leah Thomas winning an NCAA title in 2022. And now the Trump administration is demanding U.S. schools comply with Title IX. Well, Wisconsin researchers are stunned by the discovery of Lake Michigan's ghost ship, which had been lost since a storm in 1886. It's been hidden in Lake Michigan for nearly 140 years. A press release shared with Fox News, officials identified the wreck as the F.J. King, a schooner that went down in a late-night storm off of Bailey's Harbor in Wisconsin in 1886. Became known as a ghost ship due to her elusiveness. One of the most highly sought ships on Lake Michigan, been the subject of countless search efforts since the 1970s. Area commercial fishermen have claimed to bring up pieces that are wrecking their nets, and local lighthouse keeper claimed to have seen her mast breaking the surface, but when shipwreck hunters scoured the area, they came up empty-handed. Well, killer mom Susan Smith needs to remain incarcerated, according to the prosecutor who put her away. Former South Carolina prosecutors successfully put Susan Smith behind bars for infamously killing her two young sons in 1994 by strapping them into their car seats and rolling the vehicle into a lake, says she needs to remain in prison. Tommy Pope, who led the prosecution against Smith and now serves in the state legislature as a Republican, notes she'll be once again eligible for parole in 2026. She was denied parole in 2024. And he's adamant she should not be released under any circumstances. Well, the Love You Forever author may soon die by assisted suicide. Pro-life groups are calling that decision heartbreaking. He is the author of the beloved and iconic children's book, Love You Forever. He considered ending his life through physician-assisted suicide. The name is Robert Munch, and he wants to pursue assisted suicide, according to Carol Tobias, president of National Right to Life. And the book illustrates the kind of care and unconditional love that should be extended to a person in their last days. He's 80 years old, written 85 published books, including Love You Forever and The Paperback Princess and The Mud Puddle. And now he's been diagnosed with dementia and Parkinson's, reportedly approved for physician-assisted suicide in Canada. Well, Bad Bunny's going to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show. I think it's Super Bowl 60. This announcement was made at halftime of the Green Bay Packers and Dallas Cowboy game on Sunday night. His real name is Benito Martinez Ocasio, been one of the top recording artists since 2016. He's a Puerto Rican native who won Grammy Awards for Best Latin Pop or Urban Album and Best Music Urbana Album for a couple of others. He also appeared in the Squared Circle for WWE and a Netflix movie, Happy Gilmore 2. Now, rumors had been about, before the announcement, about Taylor Swift potentially headlining the halftime show. Her appearance at Arrowhead Stadium to support boyfriend Travis Kelce helped bring more viewers to NFL games in the last 2 seasons. But there was a rumor she felt disrespected by the NFL, so she wasn't going to do it. Well, a retired border agent was among 2 victims killed in Texas in a casino shooting incident at Eagle Pass. He was a retired U.S. Customs and Border Protection agent among the 2 victims killed in the shooting at the Kickapoo Lucky Eagle Casino on Sunday. And Eagle Pass Mayor Aaron Valdez confirmed this to social media. Described Mark Antley as a beloved member of the community and said he was remembered for his law enforcement career and the impact on Eagle Pass. The suspect that did the shooting was Karen Rashid Jones, 34, of San Antonio. He was arrested in Wilson County after a chase. Currently in custody in Wilson County, Stockdale, but be extradited back to Eagle Pass, where the investigation is based. As I say, there's been a lot of crazy people out there. And unfortunately, most of them seem to have guns. Well, New York Times, Nicole Hannah Jones calls public mourning for Charlie Kirk unsettling. She is a New York Times correspondent and a 1619 Project author. Calls efforts by public figures to mourn and venerate Charlie Kirk after the assassination is unsettling. After Kirk was assassinated during a Turning Point USA event on a Utah campus, Hannah Jones accused some Democrats and political centrists of lining up to honor somebody with what she called extremist views. Well, on that note, let's turn to our topic. We're still talking about ghosts. You know, if you're a ghost hunter, churches are some of the most fascinating places to visit, and according to many reports, some of the most haunted. In fact, they're right up there with cemeteries and asylums and abandoned old houses for a fascinating investigation. You know, you have to understand the difference between what's known as residual and intelligent haunting. In a residual haunting, there isn't a ghost or spirit there at all. It's just a moment in time caught in a playback loop. It's going to replay itself over and over. The apparition you see has nothing whatsoever to do with your presence. It's going to ignore you and go on about its business. That's because the apparition is just the time continuum, not really a ghost at all. But with an intelligent haunting, you're in the presence of a ghost or spirit that might choose to interact with you. It all depends on the phantom itself. With an intelligent haunting, the ghost or spirit's will often acknowledge your presence. It may do things like talk to you, throw things at you, or just make noises to get your attention. Or, on the other hand, it might want you to run and scream in fear getting out of that location. So we're going to talk about a few churches, cathedrals. We're going to start out in New Orleans, Louisiana. St. Louis Cathedral. You know, the land it's built on actually has been host to 4 churches in the past. 1718, the first church was a crudely built wooden building, a temporary structure used by people seeking spiritual guidance. The second church was built in 1727, was constructed from timber and brick, and served the New Orleans community until 1788 when they burned to the ground along with much of the French Quarter. 1794, the Spanish built a fantastic church, which was later dubbed a cathedral by Pope Pius. Initially, 2-sided round steeples were part of the building. In 1819, famed architect Ben Henry Latrobe, who designed the White House, was commissioned to create a central bell tower. The clock and the bell were imported from Paris during the construction. Well, because the population of New Orleans had grown exponentially, the cathedral underwent a major renovation to enlarge the space. During the renovation, unfortunately, the central tower collapsed. The entire cathedral had to be rebuilt, which caused it to lose almost all its Spanish architecture. The result, in 1850, was a stunning cathedral that Pope John Paul II upgraded to a basilica. Well, before the latest renovation of the St. Louis Cathedral, was used to bury some of the most prominent citizens in New Orleans. So if you do decide to visit this cathedral in New Orleans, don't forget you're walking over one of the earliest cemeteries in the city. In addition, the St. Louis Cathedral Basilica is undoubtedly one of the most haunted places in New Orleans. It all began in 1764, when the King of France gave the King of Spain not just the colony of New Orleans, but all his Louisiana property in the Treaty of Fontainebleau. Problem was, the King of Spain failed to inform his Creole subjects in New Orleans about the deal. As a result, when the Spanish showed up in 1766 and replaced the French flag with the Spanish flag, many of the people of New Orleans thought they were being invaded. They formed an army led by 6 prominent Creole men, and there was a skirmish, and the Spaniards retreated quickly to Cuba. 1769, 24 Spanish ships arrived carrying troops ready for battle along with the new Irish governor, Don Alejandro O'Reilly. Makeshift army was quickly overwhelmed, and the Spaniards regained control of New Orleans. Governor O'Reilly ordered his troops to round up the 6 leaders of what he viewed as a rebellion, and without any legal proceedings, he had them shot. Left their bodies in front of the cathedral and forbid anybody from removing the 6 dead men for burial. Further said the bodies were to be left rotting in front of the cathedral to teach a lesson to the people of New Orleans. And if anybody attempted to remove the bodies, they were going to be shot as well. Well, the act of slaying the 6 men and leaving their bodies unburied was abhorrent to many of the people in New Orleans, along with Pierre Dagobert, priest at the cathedral, and the Spanish, who were devout Catholics. Pierre Dagobert twice paid a visit to the governor, begging him to allow the slain men to be given a proper burial. The request was not only refused, but Governor O'Reilly threatened to have the priest shot if he returned to ask for the bodies to be buried one more time. According to local lore, on the stormy night, the priest got all the families of the dead men together, and with a few helpers, gathered the bodies of the men, put them in wooden coffins, and brought them into the cathedral so they could have a funeral mass. Once that mass was concluded, the dead men were carried down the streets of New Orleans in the storm, with Pierre Dagobert singing hymns to the old St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 and buried in unmarked graves. With all these proceedings taking place, not one Spanish soldier sounded the alarm. Well, Pierre Dagobert died of natural causes in 1776 and was buried under the altar. It's said that the spirit of Pierre Dagobert lives on in the cathedral and can often be seen walking up and down the aisles of the church with his head down and his sandals not making any sound on the floor. Well, imagine walking through the city on an early rainy morning and seeing a mist in front of you that transformed into a monk wearing sandals and a robe, making his way down from the front of the cathedral, the Pirates' Alley, through the iron gates that mark St. Anthony's garden. Well, not only do you see this monk, but you hear him softly singing Kyrie, or another 18th century tune he was fond of. Well, some people swear the phantom monk singing can be heard for an extended period or until he walks through the locked door at the back of the building. Some say that when the energy is right, you can see the funeral procession of the 6 men as the monk leads them to the cemetery. Well, Pierre Antoine was one of the most famous ghosts tied to the St. Louis Cathedral. He arrived in New Orleans in 1774 and was named as pastor at the cathedral. He was known throughout New Orleans to be generous and kind, and soon became highly beloved in the city until he died in 1829, when he was deeply mourned in New Orleans. Body was interred inside the cathedral 3 days after his death. Well, the spirit of Pastor Antoine is frequently seen in the cathedral. People graced with his presence immediately know who he is because his portrait is a place of honor inside the cathedral. The portrait itself depicts a thin, tall man with long, white, flowing beard and dark brown eyes, adorned in a traditional black monk's robe and sandals. Well, what's the most mysterious is that the ghost of Pastor Antoine is seen in other areas of New Orleans as well. One of his favorite haunts is the alley next to the cathedral. Given the brutal history this church has borne witness to over the years, it's a little surprised that it's haunted and sits in one of the most haunted cities in the country. Of course, El Paso is the most haunted city in the country. Like everything else, although there needs to be a balance, it appears that not all the spirits in the church were victims of brutality. Pastor Antoine, whose apparition is seen throughout the church, is there to tend to the lost souls whose stories have been lost to time. Maybe he's tending to those 6 men who were brutally murdered and left to rot in the streets, trying to bring peace to their souls. There are many who believe that is the case. Well, from New Orleans, let's go to Dallas County, Alabama. Adams Grove Presbyterian Church. It's a Greek revival-style church. That style was popular in the 1800s. Erected in 1853. Last service was held in 1974, and then in 1986 it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. It's one of the last pre-Civil War churches left standing in that area of Alabama. It's now privately owned, and trespassing is discouraged. Most of the original features, including the windows and the walls, are still in place. And although the church has been left to the elements, you can still see the graceful wooden pillars that mark the 2 entrances to the small church. It sits alongside the church cemetery sits alongside the building and holds the bodies of many of its former parishioners. Worn tombstones rise from the ground and are protected by large trees filled with Spanish moss. It's actually an eerie scene, even in the daylight, as the sun penetrates the trees and throws spooky shadows to dance across the grounds. Well, there have been a number of stories hold that if you're a ghost hunter and investigator in this church in the pitch blackness, you may get more than you bargained for. A gentle breeze laughs through the trees, and, well, I think we had a bit of a glitch. So I want to start this little section over again. Imagine if you're a ghost hunter and you're investigating this church and it's pitch black. There's a gentle breeze that wafts through the trees, causing the branches on the tree to rub against each other. Plays something of a tune as the Spanish moss dances in the wind. And even though it's a hot night, your arm is suddenly become ice cold, as if icy fingers were touching you. And when you turn around, you're looking into the fiery red eyes of a shadow man. He's tall, blacker than black. You can almost see fires burning where his shocking red eyes are. Your blood, of course, runs cold, and you have the urge to run. But you're actually hypnotized by the entity's piercing eyes. Then you gather your wits about you and call for your friends, who are exploring elsewhere, of course, to come help you. And as soon as you give out your almost primal scream, the shadow man releases you and vanishes as quickly as he showed up. First thought is that you just came face to face with a demon, but as you calm down and your heart stops beating out of your chest, you Begin to recall the stories of shadow men with red eyes you've heard about from other places. Might even start to relax, thinking you've escaped a demonic entity, but the question is, have you? One ghost hunter that had this experience still questions what he saw. And he might not know for sure, but he certainly saw something. The cemetery that lies at the doorstep of Adams Grove Presbyterian Church appears to have a guardian. That's according to a lot of tourists and ghost hunters who've dared to explore it. It's a Confederate soldier who's said to haunt the cemetery. When people stroll among the graves, he makes himself known by appearing as a full-body apparition and yelling at people to get off the property. One ghost hunting team, called themselves Alabama Ghost Stoppers, claimed they were chased out of the cemetery by rifle-toting Confederate soldiers. It's said that he told those people to go on and get. If you're lucky enough to see the phantom soldier, you may initially believe you're seeing somebody dressed in a Confederate soldier's uniform till he vanishes into thin air right in front of your eyes. It appears the soldier in that cemetery at the Adams Grove Church is an intelligent entity and that he interacts with the living. Some may believe he's a long-forgotten relic fighting a war that's been over for years. But in this case, it's thought that he's just standing guard, protecting the cemetery from the living interlopers who dare to walk through it. Well, as you explore that small pre-Civil War church, imagine hearing thunder in the distance. And you see a man who's believed to be one of the church's past ministers who appears out of nowhere on the front porch with his hand in the air, wearing a black suit and a gaucho hat, and seems to be either yelling at the heavens or praying. And as soon as the rain starts, this yet to be identified minister vanishes into nothingness as quickly as he appeared. And as with any large gathering, you just know there's going to be a baby there that's going to cry. Hard as the mothers or fathers may try to console it, the baby continues to shriek and wail. Well, imagine you're in front of the abandoned Adams Grove Presbyterian Church when you hear a baby crying inside the sanctuary. And the closer you get, the fainter the crying gets. When you finally get to the entrance, the baby starts crying altogether. But then as you walk away, the baby starts crying again. And this scenario will repeat itself as you walk back toward the church. Well, the locals all know this baby's crying, but nobody knows why or whose baby it is. And even in death, the baby's not happy. Could this phantom baby, could it want a bit of motherly love? Well, even though the church is no longer used, there's still activity in the building. The shadow man with the glowing red eyes is a source of mystery to many. A lot of paranormal researchers believe the shadow man, or shadow people in general, are a form of demon, although the shadows don't usually hang around long enough to come to a definitive conclusion. Others speculate that shadow people are a separate type of entity and are mere watchers observing the living as if it were in a petri dish. So is it a demon or an unknown kind of entity? Well, that's for you to decide. As for the Confederate soldier, it's not known at this time if this soldier's body is buried at the cemetery or maybe members of his family are. One thing is for sure, though. A trip to this cemetery at the Church of Adams Grove may get you more than you bargained for. Well, from Alabama, let's go to Norwich, UK, the Norwich Cathedral. Well, construction of this church began in 1096 when an Anglo-Saxon settlement and two other existing churches were destroyed to make room for this monolithic cathedral. Landowners weren't paid for their property, but instead told it was for the greater good. They should be happy they were being robbed. The building was completed in 1145 and its Norman spire still in place today, even though in 1169 that spire was struck by lightning and the entire structure was set on fire. And inside the church, evidence of this destructive fire can still be seen, even today, because a lot of the limestone has swaths of pink discoloration because of the reaction it had to the hot temperatures. But with a few minor renovations, save for the glass front cafe and a bit of recovery after a riot in 1272, not much has changed in the church since 1480. After the English Civil War in 1643, the cathedral was raided by Puritans who destroyed any symbol of the Roman Catholic religion they could get their hands on. Also, during this time, the cultural impact of the Civil War was huge. During the Restoration of 1660, the cathedral was restored to some version of its former glory. And as a testament to this, a few medieval paintings survived, and you can see them today in the treasury on the south side of the cathedral. Well, centuries have passed since the church has seen periodic destruction. However, visitors and worshippers can still see visible musket holes in some of the cathedral's prominent monuments. In addition, Norwich Cathedral is home to more roof bosses than any other church in the world. Roof bosses are carved figures that are constructed of wood or stone. They can generally be found in the intersections of the vaults on the roof. The roof carvings at Norwich Cathedral depict some of the most brutal and bizarre scenes you'd ever witness. They include such things as the crucifixion and the apocalypse, with all the beasts from hell present, up to a thief stealing a woman's clothes from a washerwoman. Amongst all the colorful and interesting features of the cathedral is the addition of a copper bowl, now used as the baptismal font. It was originally used by the Roundtree's factory to mix the caramel that goes inside Rolo chocolates. Quite an interesting transition, wouldn't you say? Well, the cathedral is home to a few large tombs and chapels of wealthy priests from long ago, including effigy tombs. There's also Bishop Goldwell's tomb. It's not only huge, but also painted in bright colors. It was damaged by the destruction that took place during the Civil War when the bishop's face and hands were destroyed. In fact, a musket ball is still in place on the side paneling as well. Then you have the skeleton memorial to Thomas Gooding. Most people miss it because it's behind visitor chairs and not as flashy as some of the tombs of priests that sit close to it. Locals refer to the skeleton memorial as just a skeleton. What some people don't know is that the body of Thomas Gooding was buried standing up inside the cathedral itself. He believed if he was buried standing up, he'd be able to enter the kingdom of heaven faster and head first. Then you've got William Inglot's tomb. He died in 1621. When he was alive, he was a lay clerk and organist. His painted memorial, which depicts him as being dead with two choir members holding a wreath over him, is painted on the pier near the Presbyterian screen. Also displayed on his memorial are skulls, an hourglass, and a paragraph of text that sits so high it's difficult for most people to read. There's also the tomb of Edith Cavell. In recent years, recent in the cathedral's history, that is, Edith Cavell, the nurse during the First World War, was interred in the cathedral. She's considered by many to be a pioneer in modern nursing and saved soldiers on both sides without worrying about what nationality they were. She also assisted about 200 triple entente soldiers to escape from Belgium when it was occupied by the Germans, which ended up getting her executed. Many people consider her a Christian martyr, and there's a pilgrim trail that leads up to her grave. Then we've got Matthew Champion, who has studied medieval graffiti in churches across the UK. He found some graffiti markings that sit to the left of the presbytery screen and before you enter the choir stalls. Markings are made up of a pattern of symbols that interlock with the included initials and boats and surnames. But despite the name witch-marked, the symbols aren't connected to witchcraft at all, but they're used to reinforce prayers, protect and defend against any evil spirits that may try to enter the space. They add a goodness to the church itself. One in the space mainly reserved for use by clerics and clergy is the name of a family carved upside down. That family name is Kingsford. A man named Colin Howey, along with Matthew Champion, explained in pre-modern English society to invert something like this is generally acknowledged to be a way of wishing ill fortune on a subject. In other words, it's a curse. Alongside the family name of Kingsford, there's a carved combination of a moon and a sun. Well, when these particular symbols are combined, they are said to make up a curse. But nobody knows what the family of Kingsford did to warrant a curse being placed on the family name, but it would have been carved at a time of high literacy and because it was carved upside down. Even an educated person would have a hard time deciphering it. Well, in 2015, a woman visiting the cathedral snapped a picture of a ghostly specter that some people believe is the figure of a bishop. A lot of folks think this unidentified bishop is buried somewhere on the cathedral grounds. 1736, a man claimed to see the spirit of a martyred priest walking by Erpingham Gate, which is one of the ways into the cathedral's grounds. After he saw this apparition, he raced to a local inn and told the landlord what he'd seen. Judging by the description of the phantom priest, the landlord believed it to be the ghost of Reverend Thomas Tunstall, Catholic martyr. Reverend Tunstall had been drawn and quartered, hanged, and then suffered the insult of having parts of his body put on display throughout the town of Norwich. He must have really annoyed somebody. Well, renovations were taking place in one of the many cathedral buildings of the cathedral itself. There were reports of tools and other items being moved. It all stopped as soon as some cathedral officials were called in to look at the activity. A lot of folks believed the tools moving were simply spirits that had been disturbed during renovation or were voicing their displeasure by moving the items and the tools. Well, with so many people being buried in or at the church, how could it not be haunted? It may be comforting to know that so many ex-bishops and priests are buried close by to keep a watchful eye on this beautiful cathedral. One of the most interesting aspects of the hauntings at the church is the appearance of the renovation ghost. It's common for a long asleep spirit to be awakened by renovation noises. Their peaceful slumber is disturbed, so they have to see what's going on, and in some cases object to the beloved resting place being changed. Curious thing about renovation ghosts is that after the renovations are complete, a lot of them return to their eternal sleep, never to be seen or heard from again. What's most curious about this building are the various markings in the form of witches' marks and upside-down names of certain families that appear in multiple places in the church. While the witches' marks aren't particularly threatening in any way, nor are they meant to be, it's interesting that whoever made the marks chose the church and that particular location inside the church. Maybe they're there to help protect not only the church, but also to protect the people whose surnames are mentioned in the marks. Now, the upside-down surnames, of course, are another story. And the mystery of the curse is still alive, and it could be, given the size of the cathedral, that a lot of other curses of this nature are lying in wait for the unsuspected explorer of the cathedral to discover. You can only hope that the secret of these curses is brought to light, and with some research, whether the curses, find out if the curses worked at all. Well, our next location is Cheyenne, Wyoming, St. Mark's Episcopal Church. Before 1868, most church services in Cheyenne were held in schools or private homes. And then in 1886, in a congregation composed of a lot of cattle barons and large ranch owners, there wasn't room in any of the smaller buildings to accommodate the worshipers. So Joseph Cook made plans to build a church. Started out as a simple clapboard building, but soon grew ambitiously into plans for a Gothic cathedral modeled after the Stoke Poges Church in England, complete with a bell tower and funded by the many wealthy worshippers. And toward the end of 1886, the foundation for this grand church was in place. But the winter of 1886 and 1887 was extremely harsh. Cold weather and blizzards killed a lot of the cattle. And without the cattle ranchers being prosperous enough to help fund the construction, it took another 2 years before the new building was ready to welcome the congregation. And even though the church itself opened in 1888, the bell tower still wasn't finished. The rector at that time, Dr. Rafter, hired 2 Swedish young men to complete the bell tower because nobody locally had the skills or training necessary to finish the tower. Well, once the foundation for the tower was in place and construction started, Dr. Rafter went by to check on the progress. Found only one man working. The man was extremely agitated, was acting bizarrely. Both stonemasons failed to show up for work the next day. Seemingly, they had vanished into thin air. When new workers were hired, they almost immediately started to complain of hearing strange noises, such as the sound of hammering and tapping and disembodied whispers coming from the walls of the tower. Well, it wasn't until a few years later that a man came forward and told a strange story. Excuse me. He said when the Swedish stonemasons were working on the bell tower, one of them slipped and fell to his death. And his Swedish co-worker was afraid of being deported, so he entombed the dead stonemason's body in the bell tower. Well, the bell tower was turned into a study for the rector and was finally completed in 1924. But bizarre events soon began to occur in the tower with the sounds of banging and voices. And workers refused to work on the tower because they thought it was cursed and the room was sealed off. Finally, to appease the workers, Dr. Bennett, or Father Bennett, directed him to build the ghost its own room, complete with a chandelier and inlaid wood floor. You can only reach this room by climbing an 85-foot spiral staircase that begins in the church basement and leads up to the room for the ghost, which is located just under the 11 carillon bells. Well, then in 1966, an old man confessed to Father Todd he was one of the Swedish men who originally worked on the bell tower and that his co-worker did indeed fall to his death. He said he panicked and believed he might be blamed for the death, so he buried the man in the wall and cemented it over. 1979, the church thought it'd be a good idea to open the bell tower for tours to cater to the curious and people who believed in the paranormal. 1979, as part of a huge Halloween promotion, it was the brainchild of a local radio station. A psychic was brought in to see if they could pick up anything in the bell tower. Psychic claimed to have various experiences and concluded the Swedish stonemason wasn't the only ghost or spirit that called the bell tower home. It all began when the psychic ascended the stairs to the bell tower. She claimed to be almost overcome by a horrible feeling and proclaimed it was a frightened and upset spirit there. Said there was also another spirit there. Description matched that of the deceased Father Rafter. Well, when the radio host and the psychic set up in the bell tower, Father Todd locked them in and left. Well, when the psychic looked out the window, she said she saw little balls of white light doing an intricate dance below the gravestones in the church cemetery below. Then she said she saw little blue lights coming up the stairs to the room they were in and was filled with a horrible feeling. Then some sort of slime started to ooze out from between the floorboards, and the carillon bells began to ring by themselves. Over the sounds of the bells, she said they heard a loud male voice screaming, "Get out while you still have your mind." Well, the radio host freaked out and called for help. 15 minutes later, the bell tower was empty. After 20 minutes, the bells started to troll out their song by themselves, and although it was a search by the local police, nobody was found. Today, there aren't any tours of the bell tower or the ghost room. The current clergy strongly believe the spirits are happiest when not being disturbed. But parishioners still report hearing organ music coming from the bell tower. Even though a church pipe organ was once sealed in the tower, it's long since been removed from the church. Well, by all reports, St. Mark's is an interesting church because of the paranormal activity has been consistent. It's also investigated by several people. Although the people investigating the activity, save for the psychic, were using the church as a publicity stunt for their radio station, it doesn't lessen the fact that the activity does exist. Many paranormal researchers will tell you it's not nice to trifle with some spirits because these phantoms can hurt you. But in the case of the church, it seemed at least one of the spirits was trying to warn the living by telling them to get out while you still have your mind. Well, this spirit might be the ghost of the Swedish worker who walked into the tower. Could be that of the worker who was believed to be dead but wasn't dead at all, and the panic of the other worker to hurry and conceal the body caused his co-worker to be buried alive. Also a distinct chance that the deceased parishioners and pastors still inhabit the church they loved so much when they were alive. For example, the organ it played by itself could have been played by a deceased organist for the church. Of course, we'll never know for sure, but there are many, many possibilities. Well, from Wyoming, let's go to Mississippi. Chapel of the Cross, Madison County, Mississippi. It was the Johnstone family that first thought of the idea of a church. They wanted to build a church on Annandale, their plantation destroyed by fire. John Johnstone was originally from North Carolina, but moved his family to Madison, Mississippi in 1819. And it was then he built his beautiful plantation. According to local folklore, Mr. Johnstone was a descendant of the Johnstones who at one time held the title of Earl of Annandale and Hartfell in Scotland. So he named the plantation in honor of that fact. He dreamed about a chapel for the plantation, but he died in 1848 before having it built. Well, to honor her husband, his widow Margaret began planning to construct a church. Now, most of the records for the church's construction are no longer in existence, but it's believed the architect, Frank Wills, designed the Chapel of the Cross. And a lot of slaves from the plantation helped build almost all the church, and the handmade bricks were made on the plantation's grounds. Artisans completed the remainder of the construction. Miss Johnstone said to have spent a total of $3,000 on the building. In June of 1851, Miss Johnstone deeded the church an additional 10 acres of land to the Episcopal Diocese of Mississippi. September 19, 1852, the church was consecrated by William Mercer Green, the Mississippi Episcopal bishop at the time. Well, Miss Johnstone died in 1880 and the plantation was sold. The graceful 3-story, 40-room home was left unoccupied till it burned to the ground September 8, 1924. After her death, the diocese alternated between keeping the church active and inactive. In 1903, the church was declared extinct. But Margaret Britton Parsons, the granddaughter of John and Margaret Johnstone, convinced the diocese to reactivate the church in 1911. This took place in 1914. Since then, different priests have taken care of the church's operation. Restoration was started in 1956, and then in 1979, a few years after the Church of the Cross was added to the National Register of Historic Places, the United States Department of Interior awarded the church a $50,000 grant to complete the restoration of the church. Now a fully functioning church with an extremely active congregation. Church of the Cross is often described as a Gothic masterpiece, which is a stunning chapel and pointed arched doorways, also adorned by graceful windows with a sharp tip on each one. Well, one of the best-known ghosts at the Church of the Cross is most often seen in the cemetery behind the church. Just past the wrought iron enclosure is the grave of Henry Vick. According to the story, Helen Johnstone, the daughter of John and Margaret Johnstone, and Henry Gray Vick were madly in love and engaged to be married. 4 days before the wedding, Henry Vick was killed. As you can imagine, Helen was utterly heartbroken and reported that she wore a wedding dress to Henry's funeral. 4 days later, May 21st, 1859, which would have been Helen and Henry's wedding day, a path of torchbearers illuminated the path as Helen and her family walked to the cemetery. As soon as Henry's casket was lowered into the grave, the clock struck midnight. Helen's ghost, still wearing her wedding dress, is said to visit Henry's grave frequently, sometimes sitting on a bench close to the grave. Her spirit's also seen sobbing uncontrollably near the grave of the love of her life. And her spirit's also been seen inside the church. Although she moved on and married a minister, it appears her heart never really healed, and she's destined to mourn Henry for all eternity. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll finish talking about the ghost of this particular church in tomorrow's show. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.